Okay, so my first question, I'm going to start with Patrick for this one. Which personal freedoms, such as marriage, reproductive rights, should be restricted or monitored through the government?
None. I think government shouldn't be restricting or monitoring any of those personal freedoms. I think, to me, that is the essence of what those personal freedoms are. And we meaning society, should just let people be who they want to be, who their essential being is.
Okay, now Steve, you have 1 minute to respond to that question.
Sure, I wholeheartedly agree, and I don't think that that's too much of a surprise to Patrick either. The Libertarian Party, its platform is very clear about individual rights. That's essentially what our entire party is based upon, is individual freedom. I would venture to guess that of the three ideologies at the table, the Libertarian one probably values individual rights in more contexts than the others. So if there was like an et cetera to that question, I would say still none of them.
And now Dennis, you also have 1 minute to respond to that question.
On marriage, I wish the government had nothing to do with anything about that. You did mention reproductive rights, and I'm not sure what rights you're talking about because I don't know anything with reproductive rights in the Constitution, but I do believe there is a point where if you're harming another life, I would stand against that.
All right, and now Patrick, you have 1 minute to respond again.
I don't know that I could add anything more to my previous statement. I believe those are essential freedoms that should be protected.
All right, on to our next question. This one is for Steve. How should our school curriculum be decided?
I think school curriculum is best decided by a school board that's elected by the population that school board serves. We can't have every individual parent decide curriculum. That's why we elect a school board in the first place. So if we're going to have a system where we elect officials to decide those things, then we need to let those people we elect make those decisions. That said, I do think that there are too many things decided on a federal and state level, education-wise, and I would rather local school boards have more discretion in the curriculum.
And Dennis, I'm going to start with you. You have 1 minute to respond.
I believe it should be locally. I don't believe federally they should have any say in it. The Constitution would say anything not in there goes to the states. So the state itself could have standards, but I believe as far as curriculum, local municipalities, local schools should know what's best and what needs to be done.
All right, Patrick, you have 1 minute to respond.
I would generally agree that local supervision of school curriculum is the best and most optimal way of handling that. I could see, at least from a state level, where there would be a need for some suggestions or guidance as far as curriculum or standards go. I do think that's important for the state to do. But like Steve mentioned, I think locally elected school boards are in the best position to make those decisions.
All right, Steve, if you would like to add anything, go ahead.
I don't think I have a rebuttal. I think we settled it. So.
All right. Next is a question for Dennis first. Do you think that we should change the method of our representation? If so, to what extent?
The only thing that I would change on a representation is I would stop the gerrymandering of how they draw the lines, whether we do it by county or by districts. Right now, I don't care what state's in charge. If you're in a red state, they draw them to protect the red states. If you're in a blue state, they draw them I'll give you an example. Dan Brady was drawn out of his own district by the Democrats in this state. He no longer could run for the spot he was in because they drew a line around his house. So you either need to make the residency change, or you need to stop gerrymandering. So that's the difference I would change in representation. And from there, whether it's county or district or however we cut it, the gerrymandering is what I would stop.
Steve, you have 1 minute to respond.
I have more extreme views on changing representation. I believe the system that is in existence right now has been designed by two political parties to protect the power that they have. I think if you take a global look at how other countries do their representation, for example, with proportional voting, so if a third party or a fourth party gets 5% of the vote, they get 5% of the governing body's representation at that point. So if you have 100 senators, you'd have 5 from people who have that viewpoint. You can go to ranked choice voting, which is something that's starting to expand in the United States right now. Illinois is getting closer, I think, every single day to that. We've been lobbying for that as a Libertarian Party for a long time. We've got some allies in Springfield who I think can get that done. So I think we need some serious overhaul to the way that we're represented in the United States.
And Patrick, you now have 1 minute to respond.
In my short amount of time, I won't agree a lot with Steve on this issue. I will say that I've testified for fair maps and nonpartisan drawn maps, and I do think that's the way forward. However, we have to figure out a way to make sure everybody signs on to it. It does us no good for the state of Illinois to agree to that approach and have states around us or throughout the country not follow the same rules. Then we'd only be hurting our own party. And I'll be selfish and say that's not good for the Democrats. I'd be interested, I need to do more research on ranked choice voting, but what I've read so far and looked into, I think that would be a really interesting approach. I'd like to do a little more research on that and see how that might work here in the state of Illinois.
All right, this is going to be a direct question to each of you. I'm going to start with Patrick. What is one change that you would like to see
In my own party? I think my own party needs to do a better job of reaching out and becoming better community partners. I think there are some organizations, there's some groups of folks here in McLean County, in Bloomington Normal, that don't feel like they're part of the process. And I think we could and should do a better job of bringing them in and being their partner and helping them out with the important issues that are important to them. I think that would be a big change I'd like to see in our own party. Yeah.
you would like to see in your own party?
Oh boy, I've only got 5 minutes. Libertarianism is an ideology, sometimes of absolutes. It's very much libertarians very much pride themselves on being principled. Because of that, it's unfortunate that interacting with a lot of people within libertarian circles, they tend to want to fight amongst each other than to find a way to band together and take on groups that are much more powerful than they are. So to me, the biggest issue with the Libertarian Party right now is the inability for libertarians as a whole to see a big tent that the party itself can fall underneath of. The party was headed in that direction for a little while in the mid-20-teens to late 20-teens. Unfortunately, we had a leadership change at our last national convention, and it seems like it's gone the other direction now. So if there was one thing that I could change about the Libertarian Party, it would be for collectively, which is a funny word to use with libertarians, I know, for libertarians to understand that to have political influence, they need to be able to work with people of a broad spectrum of ideologies and not only pay attention to the smaller group of individuals who all have very similar ideologies.
And Dennis, next to you, what is the one thing that you would like to see change in your party?
Well, I guess if there was one thing, I'd like them to vote. They need to vote because right now they're fractured, and the establishment and the conservatives, although they don't agree on things, they do agree on probably 70%. The one thing I can say I am jealous of the Democrat Party is they don't seem to have problems holding their nose and going and voting for their person. And we do. We just stay home. So if I could change one thing, they need to go out and vote for who has the majority of their beliefs. We need to understand that there's no way we're going to have one person that's 100% that we agree with everybody. If 50 to 60, 70% is maybe the threshold, say, okay, I can get behind this person, whether they are moderate or whether they're farther right, the difference they need to understand is they're really on the same team and they need to vote. So the one thing I would change is I would say vote.
All right, Patrick, another direct question to you. You will all answer the same question once again. What is one thing that you would like to see change in the other two parties?
Well, I think Steve touched on it a little bit. I think the other two parties, are we talking about locally or like the national parties before I?
Locally.
Locally, okay. I think both the Libertarian and the Republican parties could be a little more tolerant of different viewpoints within their own groups, just from an outsider's viewpoint. I certainly am not privy to the inner workings of either party, but from my perspective, I think both parties probably could and should be a little more tolerant of different viewpoints within their own party. Not saying that the Democrats don't ever have that problem either, but lately we seem to be doing okay with that.
Steve?
I would have a similar sentiment to Patrick, and I would also add to that, I would like to see more inter-party coalitioning behind certain policies. I'd like to see areas where all three parties could work together to get change. And I think there have been opportunities to do that in even recent history. If you go back to last summer and fall, when folks in Normal were petitioning to try and get the Normal Council elected via districts. There was a broad coalition of individuals who were working on that from a myriad of ideologies, but to me, what seemed like for fear of looking like they were working with the other party, neither of the two established political parties, other two established political parties in McLean County, could get behind that initiative on their own. So I would like to see differences be set aside more often to work on policy issues where there is broad support across the different ideologies and parties.
Dennis, it was your turn to answer, and the question is, what is a change that you'd like to see in the Democratic and Libertarian Party?
With the Democrat Party, I would have to go to tolerance as well, because I know when we went through this last election, I was called a lot of things, and it seems like if say you're for something, automatically you're racist or you're anti-LGBTQ or you're anti-trans or anti-this, and that's, sometimes words are put in people's mouths and that's not what is said or what is meant. So I would change the tolerance on that side as far as the Democrats go. The Libertarian side, myself, not answering as a party, I'm very Libertarian. So as far as a party answer would be, I would say what I would change about the Libertarians is I would take them into our party and give them representation with us. That's what I would change, because I think we're more aligned.
Okay, on to our next question. I'm going to start with Patrick again. What is one policy or program that you can unanimously agree on across all three parties?
Is this a direct question or a group question?
Yeah, I'm going to do it as a direct question, so you have 5 minutes to answer them.
So can you repeat the question, please?
What is one thing that you think that you can all unanimously agree on?
Making voting easier, finding some way somehow to get more people involved in the electoral process. And the easiest way to do that is by getting more people to the polls and voting. Then your government truly becomes more representative when you've got more people showing up to make those choices. We've all talked about municipal elections and the low voter turnout. Well, it's hard to say that those folks are truly representative of the community at large when only at best 20% voted for them. So I think all three parties could probably agree on maybe not an ideal plan or the same plan, but finding some way to increasing voter turnout, I think would be something we could all agree on.
Steve, what is one thing that you think that you can all unanimously agree on?
Well, Patrick stole the answer that I was going to have, but I'd like to think that to a large extent, all three parties and all three platforms still largely agree with the principles of free speech protected in the Constitution. That doesn't mean unlimited speech, right? And certainly there are common sense restrictions on speech, particularly speech that can cause violence or harm people. But and the First Amendment issues are largely misunderstood in our general population, too. There's a lot of folks who talk about the First Amendment when there's no government happening in the situation. But as it pertains to free speech rights in the United States, where you have protection from government persecution against things that you say as long as they don't cause harm, I'd like to think that all three parties and platforms agree on that.
I'd like to take that a little farther. I would like to say not just the First Amendment, but all the amendments, the Constitution. If we can agree on that's what it is. Because if you don't agree with something in the Constitution, there is a way to change it. And that's what people need to understand. If enough people want that change, it will happen. 26 times. It happens. It can be changed. So instead of just limiting it to the First Amendment, I think the Constitution and all the amendments should be accepted by everyone, and that's what should be taught back again in all the schools. I remember when I was in school, 3 times I remember taking the Constitution tests. There has been one Constitution test for my daughter that's in 8th grade right now, and it didn't represent any of the questions that we had when we were kids of actually learning the Constitution. It was more about the history of the people and things like that. People are just not taught what the rules are. The Constitution is what we're made out of. So I think if we could agree to the whole Constitution and understand that there is a way to change it if enough people want it, and it doesn't mean it's going to go your way, I think that's what we should agree on.
All right, for my last question, I'm going to start with Dennis. This is one that you can reply to. It's how can we increase the youth involvement in the political sphere?
Boy, if I knew that, I'd probably be rich. We need to be more involved on college campuses where they will allow us to be. And it seems like sometimes that's restricted on certain campuses for certain groups. I think the free speech thing really should come into play there, but we need to be able to get to that. We need to start it when they're younger. We need to let the kids know when they're doing the Constitution test that it's more of a civic duty that they need to go out and vote when they start to be 18. Matter of fact, register them to vote when they're 17 if they're going to turn 18 before the next election. Get them involved. And some of that is here's what you have to understand. If 70 to 50% of the parents aren't voting, kids tend to do what their parents do. So they're not going to vote. So we just need to be able to get them involved in it. Whether it's programs or what it be, I don't know, but we need to get them involved as well. I think we do see an uptick of that starting to happen, but not near enough. But the same thing with the person that's 40 or 60. It just, if you're only getting half the people show up to vote, you might not be getting the representation, the true representation. So I would say if there's a way to get them involved starting at the school level, I don't know, for guys, you have selective service you have to register for when you turn 18. I think a great idea is to have voting day changed to April 15th. If you want to make it a national holiday, that way when tax day is, you vote. And or when you turn your taxes in, that's when you put your vote in. It's just one idea.
I think we need to look at contributing factors to apathy. And this certainly applies to young people, but not young people exclusively. One of the reasons I see apathy happening in the voting public, particularly in young people, is because there are limited choices for them. It is extremely hard for anyone who is not a Democrat or Republican to get on the ballot in most places in Illinois. We are in desperate need of ballot access reform in this state to allow more candidates to get on the ballot and allow more choices on the ballot. For the last decade, the majority of state House and state Senate seats in Springfield have gone unopposed. Lots of them are in the Chicagoland area, and there's no Republican running. Lots of them are in, south of, I-70, and there's no Democrat running. We need to change our ballot access laws in this state, which Reason Magazine ranked as the worst state for ballot access in the entire United States. It's extremely hard for anyone who is not in an establishment political party to run for office. Put more options on the ballot. Let people run for office that a larger majority of the voting public can get behind, because a lot of apathy comes from, I don't fit into box A or box B, and there is no other box on my ballot.
I would say something that the Democrats have been doing with some success, especially here locally lately, is finding good candidates who are able to speak about, and to, younger voters. I mentioned this before on another podcast, but last November, there were 1,700 same-day voters at ISU campus, and 1,400 of them registered that day. So I think one way to increase youth votes or youth participation in the process, is to make voting easier, especially on college campuses, and B, make sure you're recruiting and supporting candidates that are capable of talking about the issues that are important to young voters. We've noticed a trend lately that's been working in our favor, that our candidates are talking about issues, climate change, job security, how they're going to pay for their schooling, abortion rights, women's rights to choose, things like that are important to the young voters. And if you have candidates who are able to talk about those issues intelligently and with some sort of empathy and passion, I think that will help increase voter turnout for younger voters.
We will now open up the questions to the audience. So if you want to ask a question, just come to this mic.
Do you have any problem hearing me?
Well, just the computer.
I actually have a two-part question, if I can ask it, and if you want to cut me off, that's okay as well. Each of the three of you have mentioned voting and apathy. And I do not mean this as a criticism because it wasn't necessarily your job, but I would like to know if any of the three of you notified the constituents of your party through your Facebook or your emails that this event was happening today. And did any of the three of you notify any students? For example, students at Illinois State University, as well as students here at Heartland. Or did you leave that to the folks here at Heartland? I think that if you answer in the negative, that has something to do with apathy. I only knew about this event, and I'm a 48-year office holder because I saw Miss Abel's Facebook. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known anything about it. My second question is, do you think that it was healthy or unhealthy that the parties took a role in funding and perhaps even going beyond funding, getting involved in school board races in this community, as well as the referendum?
We'll start with Patrick.
I'm sorry, that's all right. Well, I can tell you for sure that the McLean County Democrats promoted this event. That post you saw of Ms. Abel's was shared from the Democrats page. So we sent it out in an email. I shared it on my personal social media. So I feel pretty confident that we did a pretty decent job of promoting and supporting it. But thank you for the question. I agree with you. I think Democrats could certainly be better. I think we could all agree we could be better at promoting events like this to help counteract some of that voter apathy. I would agree with you there. As far as the involvement of parties' involvement in school board races, I'm on record saying that I would love if we could go back to a true nonpartisan, where parties didn't matter for municipal races. I know personally that there were many fine people who wanted to run for school board that chose not to because they didn't want to have to deal with any of the partisan vitriol or what they were anticipating might happen had they done so. I would love to go back to that point. I just don't know how we get back there. I don't know how we put that genie back in the bottle. So I can tell you that as far as my local party, the McLean County Democrats didn't contribute financially to any of those school board candidates. If they asked us for advice, we gave them the advice we were able to give them, but we made no financial contributions to any of the school board candidates.
Did the state?
The state party did, yes.
Okay, the first question, yes, we put it out on our Facebook, and I also sent it to Eduardo Monk at the ISU Republicans. So yes, it was sent to them. I think maybe it's the time of day why you don't get as many because a lot of people are working. As far as the second thing, we have stepped back on consolidated races as far as pushing who we would be for. On the race that we're talking about at issue, at first we did not take a stand, but then I started seeing mailers for school board and also for town councils that were fundraising from the Democrats from Peoria. So there's Peoria money coming into what's happening in Bloomington. So that kind of perturbed me a little bit. The second portion that we come into, as far as why we got involved, the NAACP, the Lemon League of Voters, and several other PACs. So the Democrats might not give it to them personally, but there are PACs that were giving to these slates of people. So money was given to them. And you don't have to say it's from a certain party because it's coming from a PAC. It's so no different. So the way I see it is everybody else was saying who they were wanting. So why don't we get behind who we think had the best issue behind us? But I think the biggest issue is this, the school teachers union spent so much money it didn't matter. I mean, I don't know. I heard the tune of $70,000. I can't imagine spending $70,000 on a school board race. But it happened, And we didn't spend that kind of money. We helped with a few mailers, and I even went so far as to try to be in the middle. We sent out mailers that did not say vote no on tax increasing. What it said is there is a referendum on the school board, please vote. So we tried to take a middle line on that. Although there are some people in the party that were definitely against it. I won't try to lie. Some people were definitely against the tax increase, the referendum. Let's put it as a referendum. But the way I guess we saw it is normally where we step back, we saw all these things happening, and we thought that we need to step up and try to do something as well. But we just didn't spend the kind of money that the union side had. I mean, we don't have that kind of money. And the way, I guess, one of the issues I guess I saw is you have the school unions spending so much money on these races, and now all the people that they just got elected are going to be voting on their contracts. And how people don't see that as a conflict of interest more than what a party would be, I have no idea. So I would say, yes, the Republican Party did get involved in this consolidated election. No question about it. I try to take more of a middle ground myself. Sure, there's people in the party that pull you one way or the other. So yes, money was spent. Not near kind of the money that was spent. I mean, like $1,500. I mean, not a lot of money to try to get out what we thought what would be best for the community. So I don't know if I answered it completely, but we normally do not get that involved and haven't until the last election. But when I saw Peoria money coming in, when I saw money coming from Pritzker coming into school board races, it just blows my mind that why he would be spending money in Bloomington, Illinois. There's a reason, and people need to understand. There's a reason he spent $500,000 or whatever it is on downstate elections. So to say it's not one party, it's the whole party. I don't know the state gave anything. The state GOP, I don't believe, gave anything to that I know of to the people that were behind the people that we like. But we chose people. I actually had in February, I believe it was. I actually had at the DoubleTree. I brought in everybody. It didn't matter who it was. I brought in everybody and gave everybody a fair shot to speak and have questions. So I tried to be fair and upfront and get everybody's view out, and then to allow people to choose. So I think we did put that forth, and we spent money to get the views out of the people, no matter what side you're on. Because I think totally the school board, it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or Independent. I believe everybody really wants what's best for the kids. It's just how we get there. It's how we disagree.
Sure. I'll start with the first part of the question. Yes, we did advertise this event. We actually invited the Heartland students to our last monthly meeting of the Libertarian Party of McLean County to specifically advertise this event and talk about what they were doing with their political science club at Heartland. We don't have like a dedicated group on ISU's campus or anything like that. Unfortunately, the YAL chapter fell through a couple of years ago, and we don't even have an unaffiliated group that would ideologically align with us on campus right now. So it's a little bit smaller of an operation. I think the point that having this in the middle of the day probably did affect attendance to some extent is valid. I think it's important to understand the purpose of a political party and the purpose of a PAC or an activism organization. A political party exists to run candidates and win elections. Why a political party would get involved with a nonpartisan election or a referendum, I don't know. A PAC or an activism group, that makes a lot more sense to me as to why they would get involved in those types of issues. But to me, a party itself getting involved in that, specifically financially in that type of thing, seems against the purpose of the apparatus of a political party. So, and I'll be completely transparent. We had no horse in any of these races. There were no candidates running who aligned as libertarians. And even on the Unit 5 referendum, which I think a lot of people would stereotype libertarians as being fairly against. Our vice chair on the podcast that these guys produced came out and supported the referendum. So we were even fairly split internally on some of the questions on the ballot. So as the Libertarian Party, I don't think we've got a lot to answer for there. But broadly speaking, political parties should support candidates and try to win elections. Save the activism for PACs and activism organizations.
We'll each have 2 minutes to respond to the other party chair now if you would like to. So we'll start with Patrick.
I'm going to respectfully take some issue with Dennis's characterization of the Democratic Party involvement. Considering the recent history in municipal elections of some groups that supported conservative candidates, considering the fact that your party donated money directly to municipal candidates, whether they were school board or not, I guess I'm having a hard time justifying that with our involvement. I kind of saw it the other way. Some of the more progressive groups in town got involved with municipals, specifically after the 2021 cycle, when some outside money was spent on specific conservative candidates. So I think it was a response to that. And again, I'll say me personally, and I think some folks in the McLean County Democrats would much rather see a pure, nonpartisan municipal election. I think we would all probably be better off if we could get back there, but I just don't see that happening. And so when you mention things like the governor spending the money that he did, well, again, it was a response to some of the right-wing extremist behavior and money that was put into some of these school board races. When you have groups like Awake Illinois and some other organizations from around the state actively supporting financially in other ways what I would characterize as extremist candidates, folks who are looking to ban books and attacks of our institutions, I think it was a natural response to some of those threats.
Okay, Steve, if you want to reply.
I'm not sure I have a whole lot to say because I wasn't involved in that transaction there. I will say both of the old two parties will have this type of rhetoric frequently, where yes, we did this, but it was a response to this thing that you did. That's happened multiple times in this collective conversation today. It happened with gerrymandering. It just happened with the money that was spent. While those things are true, you can keep going back further and further and further, right? That was a response to that. That was a response to that. All of a sudden we're talking about what Lincoln did in 1860, right? Those types of finger-pointing conversations don't help find solutions to some of the problems that we also, in this collective conversation, have pointed out, things that we all wanted to try and fix. So I think we need to get away from conversations where we're throwing mud and start getting to conversations where we're using that mud to make things stick together a little bit.
All right, and then Dennis, you now have 2 minutes to respond.
Okay, thank you. I do believe we need to be more positive in our messaging, so I will agree with that. The one of the things that got me involved in the consolidated race is when I got this fundraiser for a Democrat that is put on there, and it is hosted by State Senator Dave Kaler, State Representative Sharon Chung, McLean County Board Member Leah Klein, and McLean County Board Member Jeannie Biles. These are things that came out for fundraisers that people that, you don't have a D on the card, but they're still running as a D. I mean, themselves, obviously. So that right there is what got me involved. It wasn't the other way around. What got us involved is when the top down started spending money. I thought, well, if everybody else is going to have a say, I do too. So maybe the Democrats of McLean County didn't give them money, but the Democrats did raise money for them and do fundraisers. I have it right here. So we can pretend we didn't. There's one more thing I'd like to rebut on. I don't know any of the board members that were running that were for strictly and straight out book banning. I believe the push was for appropriateness at a time age. Kind of like if we have a movie, if it's rated R, you don't see it if you're under 17 without a signature from your parents. If you go to the library and there's explicit lyrics, you cannot check out that music tape unless you're 18 years old. So there is an appropriateness that I think the people are pushing, but sometimes people from the opposite side of the aisle will then take it and run it as something it really isn't. It's because I don't know anybody that was running for school board that was for straight up book banning. They might have been more appropriate.
Next question.
This is real low. Am I supposed to talk into it like this? So I'm a student here, but I'm actually a return student, so I'm 26. I'm not 19. Speaking of social media, as we did earlier, recently, I scrolled off the post. Give me 1 second. The city of Bloomington's Facebook page posted that we were the second emerging housing market in America. Last winter, I was evicted by Monarch Realty for being a week late on my rent. You're gonna leave this campus and go to that stoplight, and there's probably gonna be a homeless person standing on the corner. I grew up on Market Street, lived in this community my whole life. I went to high school in El Paso. Our alternatives that we're giving for rental are like almost $2,000 a month housing units that we're planning on developing. It's unacceptable, and yet our elected officials will probably approve these things. How is it that you can justify that? Like, we have the money in the community to take care of these people, and we don't. Why?
That's a great question. I think we are spending the wrong money in the wrong places. I believe there is money to help homeless. I believe there is money to help hungry. I believe we spend it on the wrong things because we have the wrong people that are elected. What's important to them, they would rather spend and subsidize Uptown Normal's lofts that are $4,000 a month rental than help the less. The government in general is set up things. Once again, I am not against safety nets at all. I don't believe any kid should be hungry. I don't believe even adults should be hungry. We're spending the money in the wrong places. If someone's been working and they lose their job, I think they need help. I don't think it should be for years until you can get back on your feet. The problem is we incentivize the wrong things. We incentivize people not to work or to work less than to help the people that are out there working 40 hours a week. So that's the way I see the difference. I had when I used to work in the restaurant business, I had a grill cook that worked 40 hours a week, and he was awesome. He came in one day and said he had to quit because they were going to take his medical away because he was working too much and made too much money. And so I got it down to I could keep him 10 hours a week. So the government made him go down to 10 hours a week or he's going to lose benefits. I think we're incentivizing it in the wrong places. So if we're going to help people, we need to help people that are help a hand up, not help a hand out. Now, some homeless people don't want to help themselves. So whether we're going to have the food lines, I mean, there's a lot of things. Now, the Republican side, we can talk about churches and things like that. But if we're going to take care of it, and we're going to take care of homelessness, and we're going to take care of people being hungry, we need to do that. But that means we can't be spending money and subsidizing $4,000 a month lofts. The reason we are $2,000 a month is because we have a housing shortage. We have a crunch shortage. we can even go far as the Republican answer would be, hey, there's people here that aren't here legally, that they're taking spaces up that you could be taking. I'm not even going to say that. What I'm going to say is we can help people. Right. No, I'm right. No, that is true. I believe that's true. But what I'm saying is if I'm not going to use that as an example, but there are people that are in this town, not legally, that are taking houses up that. Okay, so you believe that? I personally, well, it was a fact. No, it is. I believe that's a fact. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not even going to use that as an example unless you want me to. But there are people that are here that are not here legally that they do take up housing spaces, that it's taken up. Now, I'm not blaming our housing crunch on illegals. So that's, I guess, what I want to say. Okay. Our housing crunch is because Rivian and Rochelle out here are doing awesome and they're expanding. And we don't have enough houses here. That's the answer. So supply and demand is going to tell you prices are going to go up. Do we build low-income housing? I think they do that, but I think sometimes we spend the money in the wrong places. I guess that's a better answer. But I'm just giving you, there's more than one reason that the pricing is on an apartment. You said unacceptable. I'm going to say unaffordable because it's acceptable to some people because they make more money. So it's unaffordable. So we need affordable housing. Isn't that the answer? We need affordable housing. So if we're going to do affordable housing, we have to have more supply. So the only way we can do that is to either have less people, which Illinois is doing a good job of statewide, but not in this town maybe, or have more supply, which we're building. I think there's like 1,500 approved houses right now. So, but they don't build overnight. 3 months to 2 years, some of these projects are going to be. But even then, the way that our taxes are going, I believe, with the keep increasing property taxes, your rent are going to keep going up because even though you're not paying it directly, your owner's paying it directly, you're paying it through your rent. So that's another reason that prices are going up. All right, that's it.
Okay, we'll move on to Steve.
Great. Housing is probably the biggest local issue right now. I was talking with Patrick before the panel started. I'm trying to buy a house right now. Somebody just bid $75,000 over the asking price on a house in the north side of Normal. And we lost out on it, even though we put in a bid $30,000 over their asking price. We are in a housing crisis in McLean County. Dennis mentioned, let's open the supply. So how do we do that, right? There are a lot of different ways to do that. One way to do that would be to incentivize redevelopment of areas in Bloomington Normal that could use redevelopment. Incentivize redevelopment on the west side of Bloomington, where there are abandoned buildings, where there are places that, with incentivization, could be rebuilt. Another way to do that, change your zoning laws. I'll give you an example here. Specifically, student-based affordable housing. The town of Normal has several different types of residential zoning. Once you get into what they call R1 and R2 homes, the town of Normal says you can't have more than 2 people living in that property who are unrelated. So you can't have 3 unrelated people living in that property, which makes a bunch of houses around campus at Illinois State University, single-family homes, unrentable to college students, unless they only rent to 2 individual college students. The zoning laws need to either be changed or to at least temporarily suspend some of them to alleviate the housing crisis and open up more rental potential around Bloomington Normal. The third thing I'll say is that the county board has been very reluctant to zone more farmland for residential use. Part of that is because McLean County has very fertile farmland. This is some of the most expensive farmland in the entire state. We grow a lot of crops. Agriculture is a big part of our local economy. However, I would like to see some of that farmland start to go toward more development. yes, we need to build up, and I think we're starting to see that happen in our downtown areas, but we also need to build out. We cannot solve this crisis by only building up in our downtown areas. We need to keep building out. We need more single-family homes. We need apartment complexes that are affordable for people. If we increase the supply, the costs of housing will go down. And it's up to our municipal and county bodies of government to help move those things along, because without help, it will happen eventually, but it's going to happen slowly, and it will be in spite of our local governments instead of because of our local governments.
I think Steve's right on a lot of what he just said. I'll focus on the first thing you mentioned that I think we could be doing a better job of is what they call infill, or, specifically downtown Bloomington has a lot of vacant properties. I would love to find a way for us to incentivize the remodeling or rehabbing of those properties to create some affordable housing for folks. There's opportunities to do that in Normal as well. I know some of the recent developments that got approved by the Normal Town Council, to me, are still on the outskirts of town. That wouldn't help you as a college student necessarily. It'd be hard. I don't know if you have transportation. So how close are those places to public transportation? Or are they bike, can you bike safely to school from any of those places? I don't know that you can. So I'd like to see a focus on developing affordable housing, whether they're apartments or townhomes or things like that, or starter homes where those conditions are met. And we're filling in some of our spots, whether it's in downtown Bloomington or uptown Normal, that really could use that kind of development and provide that tax base. Then it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling circle. You bring more people in, they spend their money downtown. I think we've got, and this is a whole separate issue, and I probably don't have time to get into it, but our downtowns need to be more livable. We got to stop recruiting office spaces into downtowns. We need to find stores and apartments and make those a place where people want to go live and stay, where they can walk to get what they need.
I'm not a youth anymore. I'm a disaffected, cynical millennial. But the one thing that I've found that is best able to get votes is when you offer the voters something. So when the question of the youth vote was brought up, none of you actually said anything that offered students anything. I don't think any of your parties actually support getting rid of the predatory student lending that we have and changing the incentives so that people can get universal free education. I don't think any of these parties support universal health care so that they can work as many hours as they want and still be able to get that fundamental right of being healthy. So I guess we'll ask the question again, what is it that you can offer the youth to make them want to vote for you?
I appreciate the question. I would respectfully disagree that I didn't offer a solution that would put candidates on the ballot for folks who wanted candidates who were running on those platforms. If we open up the ballots, I wasn't just talking from a libertarian perspective. I want to see more socialists run. I want to see more folks from all types of ideologies run. That would include folks who would stand by some of those platform positions that the person who asked the question brought up. So I think if we open up the ballot, we will see a broader diversity of candidates on the ballot, and that will include candidates that have those ideas. So I would respectfully disagree with the premise of the question that my solution specifically did not address allowing some of those things to enter the public conversation.
I think some of the things I mentioned, but probably not to the depth that the questioner was wanting. things like making college education more affordable, if not free. I personally am in favor of free community college. I think that should be something we're done. Now, can I convince the national party to support that, or even the state party to support that? I don't know, but I'd try. And I know that we do a good job, I think, of bringing in candidates that are at least willing to have that conversation and talk about that things. Lord knows there are plenty enough Democrats who believe in free health care, or health care for all, I should say, universal health care, some form of providing that help to the people who need it. I think that's what we can do, and that's what we do as a party. Could we be doing a better job of that? Sure, but I like the steps we've taken and the candidates that we've brought in and the conversations that we've been having with younger folks here, specifically in McLean County.
Okay, well, probably won't like my answers. I think the answer isn't free college. I think the answer is affordable college, if that's something that you choose to do to better yourself, to be able to get ahead in society. There are unions. There are a lot of things that you can get involved in to better yourself and do more. I think some of the issues with the schooling is just gotten so expensive for whatever the reason. I can't even tell you because I don't know. But to spend $25,000 to $50,000 a year to go to school, to me, seems ludicrous. I know we spend an insane amount of money already on schooling, and I'm not sure why it's so expensive. Other though the buildings are expensive to run, faculty costs money. Once again, nothing's free, and I think you have to understand that. And that's where we're probably gonna, you maybe have a rub. If it's free to you, it's not free. Someone's paying for it. So that's what you have to understand. Affordable, yes. Let's make it more affordable. I don't understand why it's as expensive as it is. I would be for making it more affordable. Same thing with like prescription drug. I'm for making them more affordable. However, we need to do that. And usually you do that through more competition. And maybe there's just not enough schools that have competition to drive prices down. I don't know. As far as healthcare goes, people that are truly needy, and I don't know what the rates are. I mean, we do have Medicaid. We spend tons of money on that. Maybe it needs to be expanded. I don't know, because we do need to take care of everyone. But saying free for everybody, once again, you have to understand free is not free. Someone's paying for it. So you can go to Canada and you can pay 70% of your paycheck to get these things free. And that's an option. If that's what the majority of the people vote for and want, you can make $100,000 a year, take $30,000 home, but you don't have to worry about healthcare and you don't have to worry about schooling. I think you're going to have a hard time convincing the 50 or 51% or whatever to give everything, to pay for everything free for the people. Like, if my kid's going to go to college, I'm going to pay for it, or we're going to pay for it, and we're going to figure out a way. But then I have a kid that went into the union, and he doesn't have any school debt. But now we're saying, you know what? He needs to pay higher taxes to pay for this person that wants to go to school. And I'm just not sure that's a line I'm willing to cross. I still think there's personal responsibility that needs to be involved. I think that we need to work on making things more affordable. Healthcare is unaffordable for a lot of people. So whatever we need to do to make things more affordable, that's where we need to incentivize.
Hello, I work at Heartland. I work for the Workforce Equity Initiative, and one of my roles is to help people gain job certificates in underserved communities. I work with many people that have criminal backgrounds, and they also have many barriers that they have to overcome this, even while they're getting their job certificate. One of the questions earlier, they mentioned housing. A lot of people with criminal backgrounds cannot get housing, even if you get help in McLean County. There's not many places to do that. Elected officials and their policies basically hurt them. So what are we going to do to help that? What can your party do to help that? Also want to point out I'm a political science student at University of Illinois, Springfield, graduated in May. So I just wanted to point that out, but also what can we do to help people in that situation, reduce barriers for people with criminal backgrounds?
Sure. I think we need to look at this problem from a temporary point of view and a long-term point of view. Temporarily, we do need some type of fair practice laws to make sure that folks with quote-unquote criminal backgrounds, probably shouldn't be criminals in the first place in many circumstances, are still able to have housing opportunity the same as anybody else would. We have laws that exist in that area for employment already and several other areas. I think we can expand in the housing area. The long-term solution to this problem is to create less criminals. It's to revise the laws we have on the books to stop putting nonviolent people in prison for half their lives because they grew a plant in their backyards. It's to modernize our laws so we're not creating an industrial prison complex that's making people money. We need to seriously look at the way that we do justice, law enforcement, and the laws that are on the books to make sure that we're not criminally penalizing consensual relationships between adults and things that people are doing that don't hurt anyone else. So short term, there are some things that we need to do and include some protections there. Long term, we just need to stop locking people up who don't deserve to be in prison.
I agree, but what about violent offenders?
Violent offenders, obviously, there is still a need for people to be in the justice system, right? Even violent offenders, if they have gone through the steps to rehabilitate themselves, we need to make sure that those protections that I mentioned in the short term are there for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm torn. Really torn on this. I guess if the application is asking if someone has like a Class X felony or a violent felony, and you're saying that they are being denied application for, I'm guessing, rental. I think everybody, first of all, everybody should have the same rights unless something's taken away. I do believe if you have served your time, you have served your time. I have some inner stuff that's tearing me as far as violent offenders. I'm not really sure. I mean, they have to live somewhere, right? I mean, I'm torn. I'm not really sure how to answer that question or how my party could fix that other than saying you no longer can take that. I guess the only answer that you'd maybe want to hear is you no longer can take that against people if they have a felony, then you can't ask that question anymore. I mean, that's the only way you could do it, which you'd have to lobby for it and get the people in Congress to approve that. And I'm not saying I would be against that. I just don't know if I have a true answer for you that, I mean, obviously someone has to live somewhere. Now, it's kind of like when you get a DUI, you have to have like SR22 insurance, right? I mean, there are things that maybe you have to purchase insurance for something. I mean, I'm not sure if they're worried about things getting torn up or things not getting paid for. I'm not really sure because I am out of that game. I don't rent properties anymore because they did get torn up, and even people that weren't violent criminals. So I don't know if being a violent criminal should disqualify you from owning a house or renting. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you. I'm just being honest. I don't think you should be discriminated against, but at the same time, do you want to live next to a violent criminal? I don't know. I mean, I guess there's always two sides to every question.
Yeah, but why should it matter? That's like if somebody don't want to live next to somebody with the rape. I'm sorry, I can't.
No, I got you. I got you. No, I totally understand. I didn't realize there was that much of an issue because I don't have a criminal background other than a speeding ticket, 18, 19 years ago. So I haven't had that. I haven't had that issue. I don't know. Yeah, they have to live somewhere. That's my answer. They should be able to live somewhere.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
Dealing with homelessness. That's a lot of people.
I guess the other answer is that I don't really like is they would have to live there with somebody else that's not a violent criminal. But I know a lot of rental applications want to know everybody that lives in the house. Do they background check everybody? Probably. I don't know. I guess I never thought of that as an issue, but I see it as an issue now. But the answer, the only true answer is to make it illegal to ask that question.
Sure, I'm not torn. Housing is a basic human right. It's just like health insurance. I think Steve's on the right track that the solution, both long-term and short-term, is to create less criminals, right? And to create less, do better at deciding what deserves a prison or incarceration, right? I think Steve had it right when he said there are plenty enough crimes where folks don't need to be locked up for any serious length of time. And when they do their time and when they get out, they shouldn't have to suffer the stigmas of what they done. They did what was asked. They did what was told. They should be able to get on with their lives and make it whatever they want it to be without anybody stepping in and telling them they can't.
Do you have questions?
This one, I just would like just a simple one-word answer. Do you think the election of 2020 was stolen or rigged? And we'll just go down the line, starting with Patrick.
No.
No.
And then one last one. Name one person in your national party that you admire and respect, and why.
Starting with Patrick.
In the National Party, currently, not historically, I assume we're talking about, yeah. I would say Pete Buttigieg. I've been following his career for some time. I've got friends who live in the South Bend area, so I've seen the work he was able to do as mayor. I've admired the work he's been able to do as our transportation secretary. I think he's progressive. He's creative. I think he has a sense of empathy and compassion for his fellow human beings. I think he comes from a place of a culture that often works against him, but he's found a way to pridefully work through that. And I love the fact that he's got military service in his background as well, because I think it gives him a well-rounded viewpoint at what a lot of people in this country, no matter what they may be experiencing or what their backgrounds may be, have had to go through.
I'll give a shout out to former Congressman Justin Amash. Justin is somebody who played the two-party game for some of his career, was a Republican, was one of the only Republicans in Congress who frequently voted against his own party because he was a Libertarian being elected with a red flag being waved. In his final term, if you guys don't know the story, he essentially said, I have to leave the party now because of some of the election things that you had noted after 2020. And even when he was in Congress, he was someone who would look at things differently than everyone else. He spent a good time of his tenure in Congress trying to change the rules of committees in Congress, because as it stands right now, you can't even hear an amendment on the floor without it going through 5 different pipelines. This was not the way that our legislative chambers worked for the majority of our country's history, or how they were designed to work. The lawmaking process in Washington, D.C. is broken right now, and he speaks on this a lot now, and I do hope he runs for office again under our party's banner.
So it's a hard one for me because I'm not happy with most of them. I kind of, once again, I don't agree with any of them all the way. I like Jim Jordan, and I like Ted Cruz. I guess if I had to pick one, I really like Jim Jordan right now. And once again, there's not everything that I like about him, but if I have to give my tip to somebody, Jim Jordan, I think, fights for what he believes is right. I guess Jim Jordan, if I have to give you a one-name answer.
Last question, unless anyone else has one.
Yeah, hi. I've listened to you guys speak for over an hour now, talk about the various issues that are going on in our community, in the nation. And I don't think we talked about China, so just locally and federally. But a lot of the key component that ran across that had to do with economics, had to do with the industrial prison complex, had to do with the healthcare industry, had to do with a bunch of other stuff, just big money in politics. Which leads me to, addressing your question about why both parties are investing on local municipalities, unconsolidated elections, because big money has seeped its way into local politics. So my question is, I think the solution would be federally funded elections. And if you can run, if you get enough signatures, you're on the ballot, you get $5,000 from whoever to run your campaign and take big money out of politics. So my question is, how does each party chair feel about the revocation of Citizens United and pursuing the avenue of federally funded elections?
I like where you're going, but I think it's the wrong way to get there. I don't think the federal government, one, it's not an enumerated power, so I don't believe they should be taxing us to do that. I believe we need to do locally what we need to do, whether it is to open it up and maybe have less signatures, because it is hard to get 500 signatures or 4,000 signatures or whatever that it is. I think maybe I don't know if the answer is to do 5% of the people voted Libertarian, so they get 5% of the vote. Well, 5% of the vote doesn't have a whole lot of pull when you have 40% or 45% in another. We do need to have better representation. I think that is by having more people vote, and that's the way we're set up. We actually are not a democracy; we're a representative republic. I don't think federal is the right way to go as far as the elections are. First of all, there's probably more money federally being paid for and bought by lobbyists than there are statewide or even locally. So I don't think federal is the way to go. I think locally, maybe open it up to more. I think ultimately you have to get rid of the two-party system if you're going to answer that fairly. But you're still going to, it doesn't matter if it's that or we're going to call it something else, whether it's the Whigs or whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans or Libertarians. If you can get away from the two-party system is what you'd have to do to get your answer. And I don't believe the federal government's the right way to do that. I think you need to do it locally. Not even the state. The local people need to run their own elections without all the outside money. Whether it be from the Republicans or a PAC or the unions or a PAC, because right now money speaks and who spends the most usually wins. Not always, but usually. So I guess election reform with how people can take money would be the answer to fix that. So you would need reform to get where you want to be. Okay.
I totally agree. We need to limit the power money has in our elections. The avenue that I would prefer to take there is to limit the power politicians have over our lives. If we put more limitations on what laws could be passed, if we put more limitations as to the potential power that politicians have over our lives, all of a sudden, there's not a bunch of corporations that want to buy their vote because their vote doesn't mean as much as it used to. All of a sudden, there's not a bunch of unions and industries trying to purchase votes because those votes aren't valuable anymore, at least not as valuable as they were previously. We need more limitations as to what laws could possibly be passed, and if we handcuff our legislators and say, here is your purview. Here is what you are allowed to do. Almost like a second Bill of Rights, even. You get to the point where you're taking money out of politics because politics isn't valuable anymore in a monetary standpoint. Corporations won't buy votes if they can't rig the tax game on the other side of that. That's the only reason they're doing it, right? They want to come out better on the other side. So if you get rid of our 6,000-page tax code and have a fair tax, a flat tax for everything, all of a sudden, those corporations aren't buying those votes anymore. We need to put restrictions on what our politicians are allowed to do, and all of a sudden, their actions aren't worth quite as much money as they were in the past.
I agree. I think with the exception of maybe the rise of Newt Gingrich and Rush Limbaugh, Citizens United messed up our politics more than I can even comprehend. I would love for a way to restore things back, at least as far as campaign finance goes, to what it was like before that Supreme Court decision. How to do that exactly, I'm not sure. The devil's in the details. There are going to be smarter people than me that can figure that out. But I would like to see it go back to where elected officials aren't spending the majority of their time fundraising, where they're actually able to do their work, to do their job, representing the folks that put them in that office. And there's got to be a way to do that. I don't know what the best method is, but there's got to be a way. And I'd love to see Democrats and Republicans, for that matter, find a way to make that happen. Locally wouldn't have much of an impact, but maybe on a state level, working towards something on a federal level.
All right, thank you. That's all the time that we have. So thank you all for coming.
And thank you all for having us out. I think I'll speak on, let them guys speak, but I really appreciate you putting this together. I think this, I'll say it, needs to happen on a regular basis. I wouldn't mind doing this once a month and once every couple months, and maybe we change up the topics and talk about some current issues. But you guys did a great job, and thanks for having us out.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And also, I didn't say term limits. We need term limits.
Yeah, I second both of these comments. I appreciate the fact that this group at Heartland has been incredibly involved locally in politics. You guys have done a great job. I want to commend you guys for having the foresight to put on an event like this, to do your podcast, and it's stuff like this where we're all sitting at the table, where we're able to interact with each other and maybe find solutions and things that we can agree on, right? If we're just shouting at each other online or, those types of things that aren't helpful, it does more harm than good. Yeah. But things like this are extremely beneficial.
Thank you.